Okay, so what you need to remember is when you are making these second blocks, you make them so that your block count once complete is 22 blocks on the left and the right hand side and 21 on the top and the bottom. Now this is down to the fact that row 22 had to be a split row, which meant we increased at one end and decreased at the other, whereas normally when you make this sort of pattern it's normally complete squares, so you don't have an increase and a decrease on the same row unless you're making a project that is a rectangle. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to reposition my camera and I'm going to show you how to add the border to your squares to make joining them all together a lot more simple. Okay, so here is our difference. This bottom square has had the edging already completed, whereas this one hasn't. If you look, it pulls it and makes it look really nice and flat and gives you a beautiful edge to then work from for seaming them up. Now on this bottom square, I'll just bring the stitch back closer for you. All I have done is a row of singles going into our little boxes and then a row of half doubles. On the edges, on the corners, I have actually done 3 stitches into the corner square, so your last box consists of two of the stitch pattern that you're working, and then 3 into the corner stitch, and then 2 coming along the other side. So if you're not following along with my tutorial at this point because you know what you're doing now, I will see you back shortly. But if you're new to this, I will now work along a little bit on this one for you so that you can see it. What I'm going to do is I'll do it in a brighter colour solely so that you can see it on the camera, and then I'm going to be taking it out on my project because I need all them colours. Right, I will see you shortly. Right, so let's get working on the border. What you want to first do is make sure that you've got your slip stitch ready to go. Now I would suggest that you don't start on a corner, you start sort of halfway along your project, maybe at the bottom of your square, so then the joins won't be as noticeable. But for today I'm just going to show you briefly here. Right, so what we'll be doing first is we'll be popping our yarn on our hook. Now if you look at your squares, you will have your diagonal line and your horizontal lines. What you want to do is place your hook between the 2 different sets, pull up a loop and make a slip stitch. Now chain 1, go back into it again and do your normal stitch. Now on this box of 3 that are, we will be placing 2 stitches in between the stitches and then 1 between the 2 boxes, so that's a total of 3 stitches. So for your horizontal lines you will be placing 2 single crochets in to the horizontal gap and then 1 between the 2 squares, and you'll repeat that all the way along. So that's 2 single crochets in between the stitches there and 1 in between the blocks, and then 2 around there and then 1 in the block, and you carry that on all the way down your project. I will meet you when you get to the corner square. Don't work in it yet, I'll meet you in a moment. Right, so you've reached your corner square. So on this corner square we will be doing what we've done before, which is the 2 stitches in between the little posts here, and then we will be placing 3 stitches where the knot is. Now what that means is you've then created your third there, you've got one for your turn and then the first one for going along the posts. Okay, so your next stitch is number 2 goes into your post, and then number 3 goes between. Okay, and that's looking a bit funny for me because that's on my knot, so it's a bit of an awkward place to do it. But anyway, so what you need to do is now carry on all the way along, going all the way around, remembering your 3 stitches in your very last stitch on your corner. So what I do is I mark out that stitch before I start working, or as close to it. So for this one, again, as you can see, you've got your 3 and then you've got your chain that goes around. So you'd go 1, 1, and then pick up that first chain there between my 2 fingers, and that's where you put your 3 stitches. Then you come back down, you turn your work, you'd put another stitch in here and then 1 in the gap between the 2 squares. Once you've completed all the way around, come back and I'll see you in a moment. Right, so here we go. I'm back now to show you how to join the 2 together. So we're on the last square. So you place your 2 in. Now you've already done your 1 stitch gap for the gap. So you skip over that first little section there and place a slip stitch through to join, like that. Now for your next row, chain 1, hook over and go through, hook over, pull back and pull through all 3 loops for your first half double crochet. Now we do the half double crochet all the way around, repeating the same steps that you had done with your single crochet, just replacing it with a half double crochet. I will meet you in a moment for the corner. Right, so back with you for your corner block. On this one you will place your 3 half double crochets, and then on the next stitch you will be placing 3 double crochets into the same stitch. And now we can work down the next side. Just carry on going with your double crochets, and I'll meet you when you get to the end. Right, so here we are coming up for the end now. When you get to your last stitch, pop it in and then slip stitch to the top there. Now this is where I like to slip stitch twice normally, and then I pull up my strand, I will cut the yarn off and I scooch down the knot. But for me now, I'm ripping it all back. So my colour's going to be white, but you wouldn't have been able to see that. So if you do that to all 4 squares that you have, and once that's done, pop back and I will show you how to join them all together, and then we'll be adding the super cool border. Right, so for joining your squares, What you want to do is lay your squares out in the order that you want them in, and then pop them back to back. And what I've done is I got carried away, so I've already done my first 2 joins, which are the diagonals, just so I could work out whether this was the type of join that I wanted to do. So if I move that around there like that, I will bring the camera down in a moment and show you the join completely. But on one side my join is raised, and on the other side, you can see that it sits like that. So what I'm going to do is I'll bring the camera down now so that you can see what the method that I've used and how it looks. Right, so here they are closer up for you. Now this is the back of my work and this is the front of my work. Now it does give you a raised stitch on the back, but it also gives you a slightly different look as well for both sides, so it makes it easier for you for the next steps. Right, so now you've had a look at these, if you like the way that these are looking and you'd like to incorporate them into your blanket, then follow along with the next section of this tutorial. But if you decide you don't like the way this looks, there are loads of different methods for joining squares that you'll be able to find on YouTube with quite a simple search, or even go to one of your other favourite creators and they're bound to have something in the list with another method that you prefer. Okay, so for this method what we'll be doing is we'll be laying our squares back to back. I like to mark my work with stitch markers all the way along so that as I get to certain points I can check that I've not missed any stitches. Now so I'm just going to do that now with you. So your first stitch marker would be in the stitch just here, which is the second stitch on your corner, or the central stitch. Now, pop your marker through both of the loops and then find the corresponding stitch on your second square. That's 1, 2. Okay, so that's my first one. And right, so then you literally count along your stitches, making sure they're lined up, and then you add your next stitch marker in, and you do that all the way to the end, and your end should match. Now if they don't match, that means that your top and your bottom square are not sitting exactly the same, because if you remember rightly, one row has 21 squares and the other has 22. So it might be an idea to count your squares first to check that your squares are sitting top to top and bottom to bottom and all that stuff. I hope that makes sense because I just confused myself. Right, so now you have your first seam marked out. What we're going to do is place your slip stitch onto your hook, and now we are going to place our hook through both parts of the stitch on both pieces of fabric. Okay, so you should have your 2 V's on your hook. Now pick up your yarn and pull it through and make a slip stitch. Just give it a gentle wiggle and a tug so that you know it's joined nicely. Now with this stitch that I'm doing, it's going to be very, very simple. All you're going to do is run a slip stitch through both parts of your fabric with the corresponding stitches on the front and the back section, like I'm doing now. And just do that all of the way along, but don't pull your yarn too tight or it will make it bunch up. If you notice after, say, your first 10 stitches that you're pulling your yarn too tight and it's bunching up, swap to a larger hook size. It just gives you enough of a, by swapping to the larger hook size, it just gives you a little bit more freedom there, and it's not going to change the overall effect. Now I'm going to leave you to go all the way down the side, and I will see you at the bottom. Okay, so you're at your end now. All you need to do is ensure that your last stitch is in the middle stitch of the cluster of 3 that was on your border row. Once you've got to that one and you've got them matching on both sides, pull up your yarn, tie it off, and get to work on the next set of squares. Once you have done both of these joins on both your sets of squares, come back and I will show you how to do the long row. See you shortly. Right, so here we are. Apologies for any camera shaking or anything like that, but my camera's up as high as it can be and I really don't have room on this table. Right, so for this section now we are joining our 2 panels that we've completed. If you can see, I've placed on my panels, I've got one cupcake at the top and one cupcake at the bottom. So what you need to do is make sure that the seams that you'd sewed in are facing towards you. Then you take your 2 sections and again you will pin along the seam so that you know that it's equal in measures, and you do that the whole length. I'm going to do that and I'll meet you back here when you're finished. Right, so now you have all your stitch markers in place and you know that your counts are exact. You're going to pop your slip stitch back onto your hook, and then again finding that very first stitch, and you're going to place your hook through both sections, both parts of the stitch on both pieces of your fabric. Pull up a slip stitch and let through your knot, give it a gentle tug so that you know it's secure, and then we're going to run the seam all the way down, skipping over that little bit in the middle, sorry, not skipping over, working into that little piece in the middle, and that's the bit where you need to make sure that you've got it aligned. If you notice that you do have a slight gap, don't worry too much, because hopefully you haven't sewn in your ends on your horizontal sections, so you'll be able to do a little sewing in that section to make it all neat and tidy. I will see you when you get to the end of this. So you're just coming up to your very last stitches here. And what you want to do is ensure that you get the very last 2 stitches